My name's Arthur Samuelson. I'm the program director of the Rowe Conference Center, which is in Western Massachusetts. And for the last 100 years, we've been offering programs to help people live flourishing lives throughout their lives. And among our distinguished workshop leaders have been Polly Young-Eisendrath. Polly is a psychologist, an author, a teacher, a speaker, a Jungian analyst, a Zen Buddhist, and the founder of Enlightening Conversations, Buddhism and Psychoanalysis Meeting in Person. She's also the founder and director of the Institute for Dialogue Therapy. She's been a featured speaker at the Aspen Institute, at TEDx, and is the recipient of the Otto Weininger Award for Lifetime Achievement in Psychoanalysis. Polly is the originator of dialogue therapy and real dialogue, methods designed to help couples and others transform chronic conflict into greater closeness and development. She's written or edited 19 books that have been translated into more than 20 languages. Among them, Love Between Equals, A Relationship as a Spiritual Path, which was published in 2019, and her forthcoming book, Dialogue Therapy for Couples and Real Dialogue for Opposing Sides, Methods Based on Psychoanalysis and Mindfulness. Polly maintains a clinical practice of psychotherapy and dialogue therapy in central Vermont. Hi, Polly.
Hi, Arthur.
We're going to talk about truth, the importance of truth and how it can be discerned. This subject is what's motivated Polly to create the Pay Attention interviews, of which this one will be a part, and we'll be talking about them as well. So Polly, our subject's truth, and that's a word that's been bandied around a lot in these last few years. I'm thinking of truthiness and alternative facts. It seems to me that truth is like pornography. People can't quite define it, but they know it when they see it. Some religions even identify truth with God, which is interesting to me because I'm not sure that either of those two actually do exist. So what do you think? Does truth exist? Is there such a thing as truth, or is it always just simply individual or subjective?
Well, good morning. Hello. And, when you say, does truth exist? Well, I mean, actually, we wouldn't all be talking about it so much if it didn't exist, because we would have forgotten about it by now. Other things would have taken over. So yes, it exists. And I think it is not simply subjective. And I also think that there are ways to discern it, guidelines, rules, and so on. Many of those come from religion, and some of those come from science. But the most important ones come from experience, our own experience. And so when you said that truth is like pornography, you kind of know it when you see it, or you know it when you experience it. And so I wondered if you could say what you experience when you experience something as being true. Like, what is that experience for you? How would you describe it?
It fits with everything that I already know. And in that sense, when I encounter something that's not true, it seems to counter everything that I believe or everything that I know to be truth from my own experience.
So when you do encounter something that seems to align with your experience, can you say anything about what the physical experience is then, or anything about, how you, let's say, perceive it from your own body?
Well, I guess it makes me relax in a way. It makes me feel that, the world makes sense.
That's right.
My life makes sense, and as you would put it, the snowball that I live in has some coherence.
That's right. So yeah, I call that a snow globe rather than a snowball. But maybe you live in a snowball, and I live in a globe.
No, I throw snowballs at other people's snowballs.
Right. So that's the key. That is the key to truth. Is that it actually allows you to relax, and it seems to align with something that allows you to stabilize. And when you feel that alignment and stabilizing, then you feel somehow more at ease with life and also more present, because you don't have to defend against the confusion, the chaos, what seems to be on the opposite side of truth, that I'm going to call it ignorance or confusion rather than falsity, because I think falsity is one category of untruth. I think another category is this kind of confusion, chaos, disturbance, dis-ease, and so on. So people, I think, recognize the truth because when they're experiencing it, they feel more relaxed and aligned in the sense of things seem to fit together, right? Instead of fragmenting and falling apart. So, you know, you can think of many things that happen in your life where things seem to fit together or seem to fragment, and you begin to get the feeling of how to discern truth from untruth or ignorance or confusion or falsity. So that, I mean, is a very simple guideline, but I think it's maybe the most important one for all of us, is that we have an experience of truth.
It tells me what truth makes me feel, but it doesn't tell me what truth actually is. And is it the same thing as objectivity? I'm interested, you know, you're a Jungian, and you work with couples and you work with individuals to find their truth, and you are also a Buddhist, and I imagine Buddhism has a lot to say about what constitutes objective truth as well.
Right.
Are those the same truths?
So let me just say that the path that I follow, if you want me to talk about that, is very strongly informed by Buddhism, and Buddhism as a religion, not simply a philosophy. And so one thing that Buddhism does is that it guides us through our embodiment. It's really a practice of embodiment, and it's a practice of becoming sensitive to paying attention moment to moment to your actual experience rather than the narrative you might be running in your head, right? And so that sense of being able through your experience to have this alignment, this ease, and so on, is something that comes from Buddhism. I mean, not that I wouldn't have perhaps figured it out from life itself, because in a certain way, you could say that Buddhism is a religion about life. It's about our existence, how to make our way through it, and about the nature of our existence itself. So, so there's that about truth. And then there is the other side, and I'll talk about these two categories of truth, but there's the other side of the work that I do, which is that I spend much of my time doing an investigation of people's subjective experience. Some of it is one-to-one in individual psychotherapy, and some of it is watching couples talk to each other about the things that they're most in conflict about, the things that hurt them and harm them and seem to each person to be undermining of their trust. And so I get to see people go through the experience of finding truth, both for themselves and on this larger level of alignment. And I'm going to say that truth is alignment with reality, and that there is such a thing as reality, and that reality is not entirely subject. Well, I would say reality takes on a subjective view, but there are laws and principles of reality that are universal. I hope that makes sense. Yes, we're inside, each one of us is kind of inside our snow globe or our little bubble. So we have our own viewfinder for reality, but it's not as though reality is just entirely individual for everybody. You know, if that were the case, we would not be able to talk to each other. You know, we wouldn't have a language that we hold in common, or any cultural rituals, or any ability to make sense of our worlds together. So there is, I'm sort of thinking of the phrase that comes from Vedanta, actually, that truth is one, but men call it variously. And so, I mean, back then when I read that, you could say men instead of people. But truth is one, people call it variously. And so there are universal aspects to truth, and there have to be in order for us to be a species, to have language, to share our experiences. There wouldn't be any possibility that it could all be entirely subjective. On the other hand, because of the way that we're hardwired as humans, we have these very individual experiences of what we each take to be our alignment with reality. So it makes it hard for us to find relationships in which we can trust each other in this thing called truth, that we can come to something like a common ground. And that is that problem of conflict about what is true flows from everything that humans do, everything from the way we look at life and death itself, to the way we look at what happened yesterday, to the way we understand what we've done to each other. So so we have great difficulty in agreeing about this thing called truth. On the other hand, there are clear guidelines for guiding ourselves along the path to find this thing called truth. So we shouldn't be quite as confused as we are now. I mean, we seem like we're so incredibly confused about what is true that I feel absolutely certain that we are involved in some sort of chaotic, confusing time, that a lot of things that people are saying are not moving towards truth, but sort of moving away. So one more sort of, let's say, guidepost that I look at is that war has been, universal for human beings in almost all human societies. About 90 to 95% of human societies since Homo sapiens have been on Earth, the beings have been at war. And so we have a very hard time with this issue of being able to share a common ground. But by and large, untruth and lies are the reason for war. Truth and honesty move towards peace. And I can see this in couples, and I can see it in families, I can see it in societies, and in the species overall. So if we want to avoid war, we have to find a way to discern truth.
Do people go to war over truth, or do they go to war over interests, their perception of their own interest, and how it's being harmed by somebody else's interests?
They go to war actually because they cannot agree on the common ground of their interests together. Now, in the past, it might be about resources like land or crops or money or something. Increasingly, in these recent times, it's been about opinions. It's been about the way you see something. It might have been religion in the past. Now it's politics or it's government, So the way that people actually regard what they take to be their safety and their security, whether it's resources, government, land, whatever it is, until they can negotiate that, recognizing that they have something in common that would allow them to have some sort of agreement about what's true. Until they can do that, human beings will tend towards finding enemies and wanting to subdue those enemies to the point of killing those enemies. And that's what they've done. So there is a way that truth when you can discern it and move along a track through dialogue, leads to peace and discovery, whether it's in science or it's in religion or it's in government. And that's because, as a species, we argue about what is true. That's in our design. We can't get past that. But what we can do is we can actually recognize that there are actual guideposts for truth, and let's find those together, because we need each other to find them. And that's where I want to go in the conversation. So I just want to put this whole conversation in the bigger framework of war and peace, because it's not just in the framework of, you know, who agrees about what for whatever you might call, you know, the weather today. So, you know, there are big, big things at stake, because as a species, as Harari points out in Sapiens, we are motivated by what he calls fiction, which is the way you talked about, you know, truth and God and pornography, that we are motivated by talking about things that we cannot see and that we can't experience directly. So all of the non-human animals have language. The dolphins have language, well, not all, but, you know, in my view, even the ants have language. You know, they have ways of communicating with each other. But certainly the higher animals we know have symbolic language, but they cannot talk about what they're not actually experiencing. You know, they can say, like,
Right.
Pass the apple, but they can't say, you know, I saw your wife with Joe this morning. So we have this as humans, as a species, we have a certain capacity that gets us in tremendous trouble, but also is our biggest grace, our biggest gift, is that we can think abstractly, we can talk abstractly, we can go to the moon that we've never been there, we can go to Mars before, you know, we haven't even seen Mars, but we have stuff on Mars now. So all of that, that whole thing about being human has certain truth to it. It has guidelines that we can follow. And so does this other, let's say, you call it God, I would call it something like unity, oneness. There's some truth about that as well. And in both of those cases, about being human and about some unity with everything that's in space-time, there are a lot of guidelines for letting you know whether you're moving towards something that's true or something that is false, agitating, and disruptive. So that's what I want to talk about, those guidelines.
Can you, tell me more about those, because you're not talking about tolerance, and you're not talking like, you know, let's agree to disagree, and you're not talking about humility, which is, well, I think I'm right, but I'm not sure. You actually believe that there are guidelines to reach actual truth.
I do, and I think one of the fundamental ones is humility. I don't think you could possibly reach the truth without humility. So they're sort of, this comes from a Buddhist perspective, but honestly, you'd find it in any religion and pretty much in any science. And so I want to just set the framework by reading a couple of things that I think are important. And I'm first going to read from this book that I often quote from, The Case Against Reality, which is Don Hoffman's book. What he says about science, actually, I think is true about everything that humans engage in. So I'm first going to talk a little bit about what I would call, you know, human reality or human truth. And then I'll talk about the other side, which is called in the Buddhist framework, it's called absolute truth or ultimate truth. And, you know, in other religions, it's called God, typically, you know. So, so this is what Hoffman says about the nature of science. What science offers is not gold standard beliefs, but a potent method for winnowing beliefs that derives its power from the way it engages with human nature. We are a species that argues. Experiments show, and evolutionary theory explains, that we reason best when we argue for an idea that we already believe or against the idea of another that we disbelieve. We did not evolve our ability to reason in order to pursue the truth. We evolved it as a tool of social persuasion. As a result, our reasoning is plagued with foibles, such as a bias toward information that supports what we already believe. The scientific method exploits all of this. Each scientist argues for her idea and against contradictory ideas of other scientists. In this argumentative context, our reason is at its sharpest. Each idea garners the best support of reason and evidence its proponent can muster, and each endures the best impalement by reason and evidence its detractors can counter. Science is not a theory of reality, but a method of inquiry. And I think science sets up a very important, let's say, guideline towards the truth. And so I'm going to mention that and set it aside. We'll come back to it because I want to talk then a little bit about this absolute truth. And that guideline in science is what's called falsifiability. And it means that you state your belief in such a way that you know what your assumptions are, and it can always be falsified in argument with someone else who is actually working in the same, field that you're in, who understands the assumptions. So you don't state your belief as this is a fact, but more this is a hypothesis about facts, and it can always be falsified. So from a scientific point of view, as soon as we speak to each other in a way that we don't know our assumptions and our statements cannot be falsified, we're really on the sort of track of not having scientific truth on our side. So that's a very clear rule that's coming from science, is falsifiability, hypotheses, all of those things make people humble. You don't say, hey, I've found out the secret of the universe. Instead, you say, I have some ideas. How about you? What do you think of these ideas? So that's science. It's a method of inquiry. It's got a very good guideline for truth, which is falsifiability. So that makes sense to you?
It does. But I'm also, you're quoting someone who's a mathematician, and mathematics has its own method for arriving at truth, that actually they believe mathematics in a certain sense is meant to be an explication of the truth.
Well, let me say that, in fact, he's a psychologist.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a cognitive psychologist, and he uses mathematics. And, in my background, I'm a developmental psychologist. I did research for a number of years. In any research that any scientist does, whether it's a human scientist like a psychologist or a physicist who is more in the area of what would be typically called objective science, the proof is always mathematical. So the demonstration of evidence is experiential, but whatever the truth is, it's always mathematical. So math is the underlying proof structure for all science, but that means that you have to demonstrate your evidence and give the conclusions in mathematics. Then somebody argues with you with their conclusions and their mathematics. So ultimately, even if you're using mathematics, just like if you're using any evidence, like you're using evidence that comes from biology or from videos or whatever, there's always interpretation. Because again, humans, we've got the headset on. We're always coming at it from our individual side, So we need the debate, we need the argument in order to get to the truth when it comes to our actual experience in space-time, like our material experience here. We don't agree about it.
So
And
do
so
we
we have to,
do we actually get to the, I mean, I understand what you're saying as a process. The truth is a process, and it's a social process that involves multiple points of view and argument, but do we ever actually get to a place called truth?
yes, it's our need for debate. That's a truth. That will always put us in the direction of the truth. And so we don't get to, so again, I don't want to confuse all of these levels. We're talking really about science right now. So we're talking about falsifiability, which is actually hypothesis making, falsifiability. That's the foundation for science. And if people, ordinary people, understand that, it will help them when they start to read, this is a scientific fact, this is true about this is true about that. They need to see that number one, assumptions are revealed. The person who's saying that says, here's how I arrived at this statement, and you can test those assumptions, you can falsify them. So, I mean, one thing in ordinary life that has been happening right now during this COVID thing is that you cannot say that you are well. You can't say to somebody, I'm well, I don't need to wear a mask. I know I'm not dangerous to you by infecting you.
No, to me, it's just an interesting question.
Okay, but even
as I have an answer to.
Well, even as a question, it wasn't really formulated as a question until the late 19th century. You know, that, I mean, it's been recent. Even, you know, all of the earliest scientific discoveries were made by people that were from the various churches and religions, whether they were made in China through Confucianism and Taoism, or in Europe through Judaism and Christianity, because there wouldn't have been a way to even have any scholarship outside of these religions. It was only the people within the religions who knew the language and knew the methods that could lead to scientific investigation. So it's the splitting away of religion from materialism has been fairly recent. So that, you know, they were unified, so science and religion were together, and then they started to split apart. And then I would say the extreme split took place in the middle of the 20th century. And since that time, we've become more and more preoccupied with individual identity, you know, and with, you know, who am I, and am I a this or a that? Our pronouns, our ways of life, our own individual narratives have become more and more a preoccupation, because I think we've gotten more and more into the idea that we can't know any larger reality. And so we should get really very clear about our individual reality, which has resulted, I think, in greater and greater and more conflict among humans, and not greater peace and not greater means for establishing a continuity of our relationships. So it's like we've moved away from tradition, religion, we've moved towards the individual identity. And all of that, I believe, comes from the existential idea that we're little separated units and there isn't anything that's unitary. Do you agree? I mean,
no, you know, I do. And psychoanalysis is part of that.
Psychoanalysis has been part of that, although Jung was not part of that as much as Freud. I mean, Freud would, but even Freud goes back and forth. He's in many ways very impressed with the Judaism that he grew up with. And he's always trying to kind of push away the impression that he has about it. He doesn't ever come entirely to terms with himself about the conflict he has about his childhood religion, you know. And Jung actually departs his childhood religion, but he comes to the recognition that this unitary aspect of experience is more important than the individual aspect of experience, archetypes and the collective unconscious, and the idea that there's a unifying reality for all of us is more important to Jung than the little ego, the little identity. So both of them are actually coming, they're kind of 19th century characters coming into the 20th century, and then Jung lives to 1961. So he's a bit more touched by the 20th century than Freud is, by the wars and so on. So, I mean, Jung was very touched by the wars, recognizing that as a species, until we wake up more to the nature of truth in our unity, we don't have a chance of surviving. We will destroy ourselves because of war, and because of our capacities, our technical capacities to destroy have gained a lot more than our consciousness about the unitary sense of our existence. So there are these two terrains. One is this unitary nature of reality that has certain kinds of rules and understandings. And then there's also the individual nature of reality, the experience of being a separate human being who believes, who really operates through this fiction. Fiction includes things like money, like where does money exist? Time, where does time exist? Lots of things that we take to be fundamental truths for our human activities don't exist anywhere. I mean, you don't have to even mention God in that list.
No, but what about death? That's a truth.
So let's look at these two domains of existence. One being the individual human being. Are there guidelines for truth for the individual? And then the other one being the unitary aspect of existence, or what in Buddhist language is called ultimate reality or ultimate truth, the transcendent, the unitary, the oneness aspect. Yeah, let me just talk about the unitary aspect first, because I think that there's a lot of confusion about whether there's something that actually does hold us all together. And when I say us here, I mean the human and the non-human world. I mean everything from the quark to the cerebral cortex, and what is that? I mean, at different times, people hypothesized that it was like Eros, it's like gravity. It pulls everything together instead of lets everything fall apart. And then they've hypothesized that it is the love of God that pulls us all together. Donald Hoffman, in his work, says that it is the nature of consciousness itself. He has a theory called conscious realism. And so consciousness is throughout this space-time, and it generates space-time. It's not that space-time generates consciousness, but consciousness generates space-time. So from the Donald Hoffman point of view, it's consciousness. It's been called Eros, it's been called divine love, it's been called God, and so on, whatever holds everything together. And I think what I would tend to call that thing that holds everything together is something like compassion or love. I mean, I think compassion and love actually are words in the English language that give us evidence of the unity, that we have the experience of suffering with others, compassion being suffering with passion suffering, or you could call passion to be desire, just that sense of longing or connection. And we do that with others. And so if some being, whether it's a small being or a large being, is stressed and upset, we get drawn into that. We want to heal it, or to soothe it, or to care for it. The way that I look at love is that love is interest. It's engagement or attention that we give to everything around us, which is the nature of our experience. That, when we wake up in the morning, we don't actually just crawl out to get some food or whatever. We look around, we engage with what's around us, and that gives us a sense of interest or connection, and that is love. And so that's, from my view, a kind of love that holds everything together. As long as you're engaged, you can experience that. Then there is this other thing about love and compassion and so on that is connected to space-time, which is something called light. And humans have spent a long time studying light, the speed of light, noticing that we need the sun in order to hold everything together. And we also have experiences of divine light, enlightenment, lighting up to the actual nature of our being here. And so light, love, compassion, these are the truths that connect to our unitary experience. And when we're able to follow those, let's say, truths, then we are really at ease. And then we become at ease with all experience. And that is where we get into, what is our existence here as humans? It's limited. So let's just stick with the unitary for a second before I get into the conventional. But so the unitary transcends, our everyday walking around existence. And it gives us the sense that we're participating in something that's larger than our individual identity. And that's a tremendous relief. So it has this feeling of truth about it. When you feel that you're not just here just to, look good and make a living or whatever, that you're here for something else.
But is that not just another story that we tell ourselves to make ourselves feel better?
I don't think it's a story at all if you've had the experience. If you've had the experience of divine love, or you've had the experience of enlightenment, or you've had the experience of, yesterday I was in an all-day retreat on boundless compassion, and how the experience of boundless compassion works almost entirely through suffering. It opens up through suffering. When you suffer and you recognize that you will never get free of your suffering, then your heart opens to others who also suffer. And that nature of suffering connects us together with each other and other beings and so on. It opens our heart to a kind of boundless compassion. Similarly, it's the nature of light. If you have an enlightenment experience, or the nature of love, if you feel that love that holds things together, it's not a narrative. It's like anything but a narrative, because you can't really put it into words very easily. And again, human beings will tell you this through time when they have one of these experiences. Say, well, I really can't put it into words because it doesn't have a storyline. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I have no doubt that Eben Alexander experienced exactly what he is articulating in his books, but it is the story of it. It's Eben Alexander's story of his experience. And that story does not apply universally, because it's Eben trying to put into words and to put into a narrative an experience that he wants to share with others to increase their ease in life, that he had such an experience, they can have it too. part of the problem is that when you experience this unitary aspect of the truth, it doesn't have a narrative, really. We can apply a narrative to it, or we can say what images we saw, but the actual experience is more like narrative drops out and something else comes in that gives you a confidence that you aren't alone, or you're not just here like a stranger in a strange land, and so on. So that experience of that unitary truth, absolute truth, ultimate truth, human beings have had those experiences since they've been on the planet, so to speak. But it is hard for them to convey those to each other. However, that's why we have religions, sciences, maps, so that you can get on that path and have the experience yourself. And, you know, one aspect of Buddhism as a path is that everything you need is in your everyday, day-to-day life. And a lot of it stems from the recognition that you suffer and other beings suffer. And that opens up your heart, and you can begin your path just with that, you know. So that from a Buddhist perspective, you don't have to go to a monastery and put on a robe and sit there for 20 hours a day in order to become enlightened. You have to pay attention to your direct experience, and you can begin by noticing that you suffer and the other beings here are suffering, and that can lead to a boundless compassion eventually. So that's one side of the issue about truth. And then the other side is a much more, let's say, complex thing to describe, because it is subjective and it does involve, you know, getting along with others who disagree with you. And if you can do that, you can begin to map out what is true for our species. So we have a species. We're not just an anything goes thing. You know, we're in a particular form. And that is called a Homo sapien by today's lingo anyway, you know. And that species has certain characteristics that are universal and always true, no matter what culture you come from, no matter what class you come from, no matter what language you speak, or whatever. There are certain things that are true for Homo sapiens everywhere they exist. And you pointed one of them out, which is that we die. And we know that we die, you know, different from the cockroach, who probably doesn't pay attention to the fact that it's going to die. I don't know. I mean, I'm always talking about the cockroach, but, you know, I have a distant, if I were a cockroach in a former lifetime, it's not on the top of my mind. And so, but looking at a cockroach, it doesn't look like it's preoccupied with the fact that it's going to die. Just like my dog doesn't seem preoccupied. My dog seems very engaged with life, automatically engaged with that kind of transcendent love, or that transcendent interest in life, right? That's why we like our dogs. So human beings, there are a number of things that characterize our species. Jung called these things archetypes, and archetype means a primary imprint, a universal imprint. And in the Buddhist terminologies, this is called a sanskara or a sankara or a defilements. And so the way that it's described both by Jung and by Buddhism, and I would even say Freud leans towards this too, is that there's a certain form that our existence takes, and that form constrains us. And because of the form, and so in Buddhism, we call form and emptiness, or form and boundlessness. So we've been talking about the truth of boundlessness or unity. And now what's the truth of form for humans? So, you know, we're in a particular kind of body. You must have noticed that. I mean, anywhere you go, you recognize a human because of the embodiment factors. And you can even recognize the embodiment when the embodiment is not complete. You can recognize the human embodiment in a being whose limbs don't exist like yours do, or who doesn't have certain aspects of the body. Because the form is consistent, we recognize it as this is sort of who I am. Or you could even say where I am. You know, I'm not where the ant is, or the cockroach, or the bat, or the giraffe, or the dolphin. Any of those other forms, they have their own languages, they have their own structures for relating. I'm in the Homo sapien form. So, what is universally true about the Homo sapien form? One thing you identified is death. And in all cultures, no matter the language, human beings, if they're developing in, you know, an ordinary way, from about the age of 4 years old, know that they will die. That will have been conveyed to them. They will have gotten that picture. So they're living most of their life span with that knowledge. So that's another thing that's universal, is that we know that we're going to die. We don't just die, but we know it. So we live with that overshadowing our existence. Another universal thing, and this is a very difficult thing about being human, that most people don't talk about at all. We have a very long dependency. There's a long dependency for the human childhood. We are born kind of prematurely. And we can't really do anything for ourselves when we're born for quite a while. And that's different from the non-human animals. Most of them don't have this long dependency. So there are some universal things about the long dependency. I mean, one of those universal things is that sex is important to our embodiment. The reproductive aspect of our embodiment depends on the sex of our biology. And we can't do the reproduction thing without the sexual thing. And the dependence typically, and pretty much has been universally, is on the being who is nursing you. And that being is the female being. And that dependency on that female being, and then the fact that it's a long and pretty complete dependency, does create certain feelings in all human beings everywhere. And Jung described those in terms of the archetypes of the divine feminine and the archetype of the terrible feminine. So everywhere that humans are, because of this long dependency on this particular form of being, they have strong feelings about women. And, you know, that's across cultures. It's been a problem universally that some kind of misogyny has been across cultures pretty much universally. The hatred and dread of women. And you could say, wow, is that a design feature, or is that, you know, a universal feature? And Jung would say that's a primary imprint. And I would say, Jung didn't say this, but I would say it's because of our long dependency on a female being. And so we have the capacity as humans to become aware that we do have this long dependency and that it does create strong feelings about female people. And we have the capacity to reason about that and to kind of investigate it. We're just beginning that investigation, I would say. You know, it's since feminism has taken on more of a widespread cultural thing, that humans have been investigating their strong feelings about women, you know. So that long dependency of the human childhood creates a lot of ambivalence in our relationships across cultures, across families, across anything. No matter how wonderful your parents are, you are going to feel ambivalent about them. And you are going to feel ambivalent about both your dependency needs and your independency needs, because those two needs were at war within you during your long childhood. And some cultures have a much shorter childhood than we have, you know. I mean, there are many cultures where you're kind of done around 12 or 13. And there's a reason for that. Again, universally, you develop certain features between 11 and 14 that allow you to think about your own thoughts and feelings. So you've got sort of your software or whatever, you know, your hard drive has been installed and then you've got some software. And so you can go off on your own at that point with some ability to be your own executive functioning being. But in our culture, we extend that dependency until, you know, what we take to be the independence marker, which used to be 21. Now it's later in our society, but certainly by the time a human being is about 25, they should be ready for free fall. Then they should be ready to go out and do the independent life. But because of this long dependency, all of the issues around independence and dependence are confusing for humans, make it difficult for us to work out our relationships for the rest of our lives, and also make it difficult for us to trust each other and trust each other's viewfinders on the whole shebang, you know, because we each have these individual emotional operating systems that come from the individual experiences that we had in our individual families where we had this long shaping of our personality and our dependency. So everywhere that human beings exist, they do have a long dependency. Everywhere where they exist, they do come out of a female person, and they have to be nurtured and taken care of by that female person for quite a while. And everywhere that they exist, there are a number of features that are universal in their cognitive development. And those features lead to languages, formations of languages, abstractions, all sorts of symbolizations and ways of speaking about experience that makes our experience hard to verify for each other, you know, because we believe in these fictions like money and space and time and God and country, nation. All of those things don't exist in the present around us. And with all of our emotional differences, we have very different views of what all of these things mean, including this thing that, you know, you were saying, you sort of saw truth as one of these fictions. You know, it's a category that doesn't have any real reality connected to it. But actually, truth does have reality connected to it. And that's one reason why we feel at ease when we're experiencing truth. So human beings, Homo sapiens, there are things that are universally true about us and about our development, and make it very difficult for us to agree about what reality is, because we have the viewfinder on, and the viewfinder is highly susceptible to emotional effects. You know, when we feel threatened, when we feel like somebody is going to get our stuff, you know, we want to protect ourselves. And it's not even that we want to. The truth is, We have to. We are designed in such a way as to protect ourselves and promote ourselves when we're around other Homo sapiens. And we're designed in such a way also to group into what people call tribes, which is really, we identify with that group that we grew up with or that we were formed by, but it isn't a perfect identification because of all that conflict that we have about dependence and independence. So, you know, there is a way that as a species, we are so ill-equipped to experience something like peaceful existence or unitary love. We are very ill-equipped for that. And yet, on the other hand, it seems to be what we want above all else. I mean, nobody wants to be in chaos, at war, you know, really miserable, alone, you know, alienated. People don't want that. But we seem ill-equipped to get to the other side of it because we have a hard time wrestling with this thing called truth.
And as I understand, there's individual truth, there's personal truth, and then there's the bigger objective truth. And those two things have to coexist with each other. They may be in conflict with each other, but they also coexist with each other.
Yeah.
And that in your work as a therapist, what I heard you saying before also is that these truths are better grasped through experience than through language.
That's right. Well, the unitary, that what we call the absolute or the ultimate truth has to be experienced. You can't tell somebody about it, right. And you can't be talked into it either if you haven't had the experience. That's unfortunate, but it's a part of our species.
But if you were able to have that experience, would that change how you approach the subjective experience?
Everything.
Conflict.
That's what we call enlightenment, or we call it, born again or divine love. It changes everything because you no longer divide yourself as a separate individual. You no longer experience the sense that you are separated out.
Right. But I would imagine, it seems to me that therapy is partially about finding your own story in some respects, and then maybe the next step is to give it up.
Just to back it up again and again with this experience of the unitary truth or divine love or enlightenment or whatever will give you the ability to do what your dog can do just by walking around, because your dog does not have an ego like you have, does not have a separated sense of himself with why he is a particular individual who needs a certain kind of understanding. Your dog doesn't say, I know your dog's name is Ziggy, so I'm going to use his name. He doesn't say, look, Ziggy needs to be known and heard and felt in a certain way, or Ziggy will not be your friend. He says, Ziggy's going to be your friend because I don't give a fuck how you respond to me. As long as you're not too mean to me, I'm going to get that unitary feeling with you. And I'm going to give it to you too, because Ziggy is not separating himself out.
Getting fed probably has something to do with it too.
Well, yes, but Ziggy has found a human to feed him. And so with that human, he's having his unitary experience. I mean, if it were that easy for humans, we find a human who feeds us and then we have a unitary experience, well, we would get along much better. But we are obsessed with our identities and our, I need this and I need to be known in this way, and you have to speak to me in that manner, and so on. We have a lot of particularities.
I think about this a lot with Ziggy. I wonder, first, does Ziggy know that he's Ziggy? And second of all, does Ziggy know he's a dog?
No.
And I think Ziggy does know he's a dog.
Yeah, I know. That's because you're Arthur thinking about Ziggy. You
No,
look at it.
it's because Ziggy knows that he can only behave with humans in a certain way, and he can behave with dogs in a different way. He
Well,
will not bite a human, but he will bite a dog.
but Ziggy doesn't have the abstraction.
No, he just knows this.
And so he's got the experience of the truth.
He knows that he's not a human.
So but that's an experience.
Yes, that's right.
And so it's like truth. Truth is an experience.
Right.
It's not a category. It's not a thought. It's an experience. Ziggy has those experiences, but I would guess that for Ziggy, things are lined up by emotion, by pleasures, by desires, by drives, and then they configure into categories that Arthur can't really experience because Arthur's not in that form. Right. Arthur is in this other form. And so you can experience Ziggy as having what people call unconditional love. They say, oh, my dog has unconditional love for me. Well, like you said, your dog has some conditions connected to it. But, by and large, what we love about dogs is that enthusiasm, that unitary sense that they have with us, that it doesn't matter how we smell or what we say or whatever, they're there. They come back, they're there. I do believe that is what humans are seeking with each other as well. But it's just so hard with each other because of the species that we are, because of the form that we're in, because of the conditions that we're in, this long dependency of the human childhood, the limited form, the fact that we know we're going to die from an early time in our lives, and lots of other things that I'm going to try to get to in a minute here. But I want to go into this thing about the convention of being a human and what truth means from a human point of view, not this unitary point of view, which really allows you to be very confident. The kind of Buddhism I practice is called Mahayana Buddhism, or the Great Vehicle, and it's the second form of Buddhism that developed in India. So the first form is called Theravada Buddhism. It was for essentially kind of individual liberation. The idea that when the Buddha was teaching, the idea from Buddhism is very close to Don Hoffman's idea. We're inside of this thing. We are experiencing this thing called space-time. They call it samsara, or the wheel of life and death. All beings that are on the wheel of life and death have a limited existence. This world that we're in has certain characteristics, and these are universal characteristics as humans experience this world. That is, the world is imperfect. We experience the world as essentially creating conditions in which we suffer. And those are these conditions in which we can't be comfortable and we don't understand what's going on. And so this suffering, or this dukkha, as it's called in Sanskrit, it's a quality of experience. Suffering is not a really good word for it, because dukkha means the nature of being off-center. And so that is a certain actual experience. And so that nature of being off-center is the nature of space-time. You cannot perfect it. You cannot perfect this existence that we're in. So any attempt to perfect it actually makes things worse. So that's the first character of this existence in space-time, samsara. The next characteristic is that it's impermanent. Things are always changing. And then the third characteristic is that it's not personal, it's impersonal. By impersonal here, though, is meant this unitary, everything is connected. It's interdependent. It's It's not like you are controlling your existence as Arthur. You come into existence in conditions that you don't even understand and that you could never control. So the idea that you could control the outcome of your experience is impossible. You can't. Nobody can control the outcome of their experience. They can only be responsible for what they do, but the outcome is way beyond their control because they're participating in something that is much larger and has really nothing to do with their control. So this nature of what you could call space-time or experience, the early Buddhists were trying to get off of this. They're trying to get out of this world cycle. They were trying to get off the wheel of life and death, off the wheel of constant reincarnation from lifetime to lifetime. And so liberation or nirvana, enlightenment, was that you individually are not going to be here again. And there are all sorts of ways to follow that path, and the Buddha sets it out pretty clearly. And then the Buddha also could check to see if his disciples were outside of space-time. He knew how to perceive in his little headset. He could perceive that way. So you get the next evolution of Buddhism in India. The people that have been practicing it now are paying attention to the fact that if they leave, this is sort of a joke, but if you leave the mental hospital, you're going to leave all the crazy people behind you, and you've actually formed some bonds with those people. So you would rather not leave. You would rather stay in the hospital because you would feel the loss of all those people that you left behind, or the beings you've left behind. So the second turning of the wheel of Buddhism in India, the teachings are addressed to saving all beings, not just saving the individual. So you're not hopping off the wheel of life and death any longer. Now you're going to be here until the entire project is saved, until the entirety of space-time is awakened or enlightened. And so you take a vow, which is called a bodhisattva vow, which is to save all beings, right? And of course, when you take this vow, or at least when I first took it when I was 23, I thought it was ridiculous. My son refused to take it because he said, that's a lie. So getting into truth is like, I can't save all beings, and so you take a vow to liberate all beings, to save all beings. You take a vow to basically penetrate all wisdom, to break through all passions, all of your desires and passions and so on, and to essentially become a Buddha, to become an enlightened being, and to stay here in this, keep on in the space-time thing. So that's the vow. It seems ridiculous. But again, if you have a sense for the truth, you realize the vow is aligning you with something that you personally don't understand. So, you get on this path. For me, the reason I got on the path is that I grew up with a lot of mental illness. I could sense that people suffer for reasons that they don't understand. I wanted to help. I got on the path of helping with the suffering, eventually led me to Zen Buddhism when I was 23. I took these vows, and now I've spent my whole life on this path, and it has opened up a lot of truth. But as it turns out, I learned only recently that for this bodhisattva path, which means that you are going to have many, many, many lives in many, many, many forms as you seek this, liberation for all beings. So I'm going to read you a quote that's from a Western Buddhist monk who translated the teachings. In the course of his long training for enlightenment over many lives, a bodhisattva can break all the moral precepts, all of the ethical precepts, except the pledge to speak the truth. The reason for this is very profound. and reveals that the commitment to truth has a significance transcending the domain of ethics and even mental purification, taking us into the domain of knowledge and being. Truthful speech provides, in the sphere of interpersonal communication, a parallel to wisdom in the sphere of private understanding. The two are respectively the outward and inward modalities of the same commitment to what is real. Wisdom consists in the realization of truth, and truth is not just a verbal proposition, but the nature of things as they are. To realize truth, our whole being has to be brought into accord with actuality, with things as they are, which requires that in communications with others, we respect things as they are by speaking the truth. Truthful speech establishes a correspondence between our own inner being and the real nature of phenomena, allowing wisdom to rise up and fathom their real nature. So the commitment to this bodhisattva path is a commitment to speak the truth above all other commitments. That means the bodhisattva can break the vow not to kill and still be on the path. That means the bodhisattva can break the vow not to steal in a lifetime for good reasons, but cannot break the vow about speaking the truth. So in my conversation with Bayo Akamalafe, he asked me if, because I was advocating for compassion over justice, and that compassion is an immediate experience that people can have, whereas justice is something abstract that people get into arguments about. And he asked me, you know, if I thought that compassion could ever carry a gun. And yes, it can. And in the story of the Buddha's many lifetimes before he became the Buddha, he's killed other beings for the sake of saving others, you know. But the Buddha is always trying to find the truth and to speak the truth. And so, you know, part of the vow I take is the vow to speak the truth. I didn't even know that was part of the vow until just recently. And so, but
it sounds like you better be really sure you know what the truth is, then.
Well, that's right. That's what my whole life has been about. So, you know, I would say anybody who grows up with mental illness in their house, and my father had transient psychoses, and I certainly understand psychoses. Anyone who grows up with that is a kind of truth monger by nature, because the truth allows you to relax. If somebody is delusional and you're a child and you can't tell whether what they're saying is true or not, it's very, very upsetting. It's much more upsetting than somebody just lying to you, because you can kind of tell that they're not lying, but they're doing something else. So, you know, my feeling is that as a person, I was headed on this path of being a truth monger from a very young age. And if there's one thing that I really, really don't like, is people not coming to me directly in conflict, but going behind my back and then not telling me the truth about whatever they're experiencing about me. I'd much rather know, you know, what somebody is experiencing about me than to have them tell me anything that's not true, because it kind of drives me crazy. You know, it's not just that I don't know what to think, but inside I get a little crazy, having grown up with somebody who had transient psychotic delusions. So speaking the truth, I got on that path early. I didn't realize it was a bodhisattva path. It took me a long time to figure that out. But there are certain indicators about speaking the truth and knowing the truth that human beings can embrace. It's a part of the human path. And it's not that hard to follow, actually. So, you know, one of the things that we talked about is this nature of what's universal for human beings. there are universals. They are known. Humans have studied them over time. They have to do with the form that we're in and the biology of that form and how it also has this long dependency, certain emotions. We also know the character of the human brain that, for example, we're not good at remembering things. We are not good at having accurate memories. And now that we know that, we can be much more humble about what we remember. We're also not good at reacting when we're under threat. We tend to perceive things that are not there when we're feeling threatened. We tend to remember things that have not been said. We tend to distort what we experience as the other person when we're feeling threatened by that other person, so that we know those things about the human brain. Human beings have limitations, which are universal, in being able to work out the way they experience truth. But there are certain things that we can absolutely embrace as human truths. And those things have to do with the nature of these archetypes or these constraints on who we are. They also have to do with the fact that we live in an existence that cannot be perfected, that is impermanent, and that no one really controls. So those form the kind of overall, the overarching path for knowing what's true and what's not true between us. If somebody says, I have a perfect solution here, this is the solution. The solution is transhumanism. We're going to get out of the problem of life and death and so on. You can know right away that that is not true. That is not possible for humans. It is not true. If somebody else says, for example, I'm a genius and I get everything right, that's not true. It's just not possible. So there are certain guidelines just from these limitations, but then there are other guidelines about our own little viewfinder views about how to work with each other so that we don't create more lies and more confusion. So I want to get to those, which are this.
Before we do that, can I just go back? That quote that you read, in a way that sort of like took my breath away. The idea, and then what you said afterwards about, yes, compassion can carry a gun.
Yes.
Is there a difference between compassion carrying a gun and hatred carrying a gun?
Yes.
There is a difference.
Yes.
But not if you're the one that the gun is being aimed at.
So all of those things, like what you just now did, that's a hypothetical. You formed a kind of, people would call it like a thought experiment. Right. What would it be like? And right. So hypotheticals are not very good when it comes to finding the truth, because like a lot of people have said to me, since I cannot actually deal with violence. I grew up in a violent environment. I can't even watch violent movies. And oh yes, you can hear me, right? It's like couldn't tell. So personally, I would not be one of those people carrying a gun. I cannot do that. I know I cannot do that because I've had too many experiences of being unable to keep my own mind, even in a movie where there's violence. However, people will say to me, well, what if you had a gun in your face? What if someone were trying to kill your children, and so on and so forth? Honestly, I've never had that experience, so I don't know. So really, the best thing about thought experiments is that they're really not good experiments, because we don't know a lot about our unitary sense of the moment until we're in it. So if we're in an emergency, if I were in an emergency and I had to risk my life to save somebody else's, I truly don't know what I would do. I have ideas about what I would do. I have beliefs about what I would do. But until I'm in that experience, it's a very, very particular kind of experience. And I don't know.
But have you had the experience of having taken an action based on believing that you were right? And I'm not sure being right and being in the truth are the same thing necessarily, but
right
to say for now, if you've had the experience of having taken an action based on what you believed was true and then discovering that it wasn't true, or that your understanding of the situation was faulty, and therefore you should not have taken that action.
Every day, much of the time, I have those experiences with the people that I care about. In other words, I'll think I'm right about something, I'll say something, it seems harmful to them, or it is harmful to them. But it's not violence. I mean, it's, sometimes you could say, well, speech is violence. If I say, for example, I don't believe you, that can feel traumatic to somebody, but it's a straightforward subjective statement.
Right.
I don't believe you is just a subjective statement. I say things all the time that I think are right, but end up not aligning with reality. But my interest is always the truth, is always aligning with reality. I'm always interested. Like, if I'm not right, I want to find out why I'm not right. Many of my beliefs have changed in these recent years. Beliefs that have to do with, I would say, the political kind of government side of life. My beliefs have changed because I've confronted realities that don't align with truth. And so then I've had to change my beliefs. Now, in that process, I've been wrong about things. But I like to find out where I'm wrong, because then it's a relief and I can keep on going. It's the truth and being right are very different. I would say I use the truth as a way to check if I'm wrong or right. So the truth to me is something that is way beyond me. It's, I guess, nothing.
So then, but the truth then is connecting to an experience. It's not connecting to it's not an idea.
Although some truths are ideas, like the idea that human beings have a long dependency in their childhood, that's partly an idea. I mean, I know it to be the truth because I've actually had children, but had I not had children, I would have had that experience as a child, but learning about it as connected to our emotional body or our emotional embodiment, that would have been an idea, that I would have come across that seems to be the truth. Like, for example, let me just say that Don Hoffman's theory of conscious realism right now is very convincing to me. I find it aligning with the truth as I know it. However, it is an idea, and yet it aligns with truth. It's not really an experience. Now, if I actually could understand the mathematics and the physics, I might have the experience. But for now, it's a belief. And there is a way to check your beliefs also. I could talk about that, but because the Buddha also had a way to check your beliefs to see if they are true.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I want to hear about that.
Okay, so it's pretty simple. The first thing is, if you can have an experience, that's the best. So what you were saying, if you have an experience of unitary love, if you have an experience of enlightenment, if you have an experience of, say, giving birth to a baby, then that's the best to align with a truth. You've had the experience, you know it. You don't have to be believing it, you know it. The second best thing is to find somebody else who has had the experience and can teach you about it or reveal it to you, but you have to check through logic as to whether that other person is making sense. So the Buddha said, you do have to use logic to check on the truth of someone else you believe. So either that person, for example, when the Buddha was teaching the path to enlightenment, he said, I could tell you I have a jewel in my hand and describe that jewel and tell you all about it. And you would have to believe me, in order to follow me, or I could open my hand and show it to you. And he's trying to do that. He's trying to show it to you, not tell you about it. Right. And so again, if somebody else, if you're going to a teacher or a scientist or a politician or a journalist, and they have this thing in their hand, but they're not really telling you what their assumptions are or how they got to that thing. So when I talk to Donald Hoffman, he opens his hand and he tries to show it to me. He tries to show it to me by showing me his assumptions, showing me his logic, showing me his hypotheses. And then I can say, oh, okay, I get it, even though I haven't had that experience. So, on the path to enlightenment, honestly, it's very, very rare that somebody has an experience early on. You first have to do the hard work, and then you get to the experience. But you have to believe the person who's teaching you in order to do the hard work. Like, why would you sit there on a mat for 10 hours a day in, total physical misery, right, if you thought it was a hit or miss kind of thing? So, essentially, if somebody shows you what they're teaching you or saying to you, they show you the assumptions, they show you how they got to that conclusion, and they show you how it could be falsified, then you can go, oh, okay, here is a trustworthy teacher or a trustworthy, let's say, mentor or leader, somebody who can show me, and I can use the logic to see how this person reached that conclusion. Oh, so I can believe that before I've had the experience. So, it's like I believed in, childbirth, natural childbirth without drugs before I had the experience of actually having a baby. I had a 10-pound baby. It was friggin' awful. It was nothing like the class. However, after I had that baby without the drugs, I knew something from my experience. And so when I had another baby, I could refine the path a little bit. Still, it wasn't perfect, and it wasn't exactly what I expected. The second baby was different from the first one, etc. So, it's like we can get close to the truth by believing someone that where we haven't had the experience, but we have to be able to check that through logic. And one thing I look for when I'm looking for mentors or leaders or people to teach me the truth when I haven't had the experience is I'm looking for humility and modesty, because that's a human being. And the human being can never see the whole picture. So I'm looking for that as an underlying characteristic before I'm going to believe anything. And the reason why humility is so critical for the truth is that we cannot see the whole picture here as humans. We're in samsara, we're in space-time. We don't perceive the whole deal. We can't because of our form. Even if we have insight into it, as the Buddha did, he couldn't remain in that enlightened state. He had to go back into his human beingness and walk around and make mistakes, which he did. And then he tried to teach, and he didn't always teach everybody perfectly well. He had a big fight with his cousin, which split the Sangha right before he died. So, he was also making mistakes. So, as humans, part of the truth is we don't see the big picture. We only have the little headset thing on, even if we've been enlightened. So, we've always got to say, okay, this is the way I see it. This is the way it seems to me. here's my reasoning, here are my assumptions, my premises, you can test them also, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah.
So the good news is that there is truth, and the bad news is you can't know it.
Yeah, so the bad news is, yes, you can know it, but only when you're having that enlightenment experience or that divine love or that moment or that cherished moment of actually the infusion of the thing. You can experience it. It doesn't last. You will always go back to your shortcomings. You are human. You did grow up in a family. They all had problems too. You have problems. And you have the specific problems, the individual problems of your particular conditions. The better that you can know those, the better you can work with who you are, which I want to get to that in terms of psychotherapy in a minute. But back to just guidelines for finding truth with other humans. I think that probably the most important first step is try to lower the threat level. In any situation where you're trying to find out the truth, don't attack the other person as a first step, because they're human. That is going to feel humiliating. They'll become enraged. This is kind of automatic. If you call out somebody else's faults, they feel humiliated. Their social status is lowered. The response is rage. That is not a good way to begin. You're not going to get very close to the truth. That individual is going to try to protect herself. She's going to try to defend herself. She's going to try to promote herself because she feels threatened. So very first step, lower the threat level if you're in conflict with somebody. Second step, just speak for yourself. Say, here's my impression. This is the way I remember it. This is the way I've understood it. These are the data I've read. Here are the assumptions I'm making. How about you? How did you read it? What are your assumptions? I'm always wanting the person that I disagree with to honestly help me out. But if that person is screaming at me, I don't have my wits about me. And I am going to do something to protect myself. I usually just go quiet. I mean, it's part of my old mechanism is just to go quiet. But that's not really what you want. You want the engagement. You want the back and forth. You want here's how I see it. How do you see it? Back and forth all the time, because we don't see the whole picture here. And you particularly want to talk to the people that you disagree with, because they're going to have more to say about stuff that you don't know about, because they're in a different camp. They've seen it from the other side. So you want to be able to talk to them in order to find out even what you know, because you don't sometimes know your assumptions until you talk to somebody who disagrees with you. And then you can begin to say, oh, okay, here's the assumption I'm making there. So that back and forth with others we disagree with, called dialogue, called debate, that is what gets to the truth at any moment in time for the human project being impermanent, imperfect, always fallible, always a moving circus. It's not the same circus, but there are various truths that always go with it because of the form we're in, but the specific individual ways to solve the problems are time limited, because the circus changes. So being able to find the truth in a limited, time limited way where, you have a shelf life and you kind of know your shelf life because you kind of know where you are on the arc. You have to keep on talking to others, being in dialogue, and then perhaps more importantly, recognizing the bigger truth of the unity of this boundless compassion, this way that we're all connected in this whole project. And if you condemn some part of your own species, then you've lost a huge part of what you need in order to keep the project going. And let's say the project is enlightenment, say it is saving all beings, say it is, something, the project really is divine love. And I believe it is, from everything I can see, it is. But if that's the project, we need our species, and we need to get with the project. And primarily, my position is that right now, the most important thing is to stop war with our own species. All of the other things can take care of themselves. The planet can take care of itself if humans could stop fighting with each other. All of the animals could take care if the humans could stop fighting and find a way to live here that makes sense for the humans. And, it's the same in our families. If our families could stop fragmenting, if people could stop estranging themselves, if we could move through the different views that we have, the different opinions, the different ways of seeing things, and actually find out what the others are experiencing, then we have this possibility of opening to this thing that perhaps, makes us unique here. I mean, certainly what does make us unique is this involvement with fictions. And one of those fictions is divine love. Could be that we could do that. It could be. I mean, I think we have all the equipment we need. We just don't do the stuff. We don't seek the truth.
But sometimes fictions are true too, right?
Well, yes. I mean, I think what Harari means by fiction is simply the ways in which we as humans can abstract ourselves and can talk about our abstractions. Right. That is unique to our species. And that may be the thing that allows us to be a different kind of being than the other animals. But so far, it has primarily led to these, it seems like ongoing, relentless wars and conflicts, and our inability to recognize that the truth comes from the unitary. It comes from the interaction. Even the human truth will come from intersubjectivity, not subjectivity. But, from our subjectivity, we have certain experiences, but to validate those as true, we need the intersubjectivity. And then to get to the ultimate truth, we need the full interdependence of the entire space-time, where we can tap into what holds it all together and have some experience of that. So, so I do believe
that. What has to happen for that to happen, though? I mean, I get it, and that would be, and sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
You have to persuade a few billion people that they actually have to change their actions or their governments or whatever it is that leads to war. What leads out of war? What has to happen for that to
Well, what leads out of war always is speaking about the truth. It's telling the truth, which means honesty. It's speaking about the truth, which is speaking with humility, with curiosity about the others, the ones who think differently or who feel differently or whatever. And also step by step being subjective, being humble, being modest about what you know, using also the skills of reason, the skills of logic, the skills that we have as humans. And is there a way to get, let's say, billions and billions of people? I don't know. But I do know that I can do this on a person-to-person basis. And I can help other people do it on a person-to-person basis. And in my experience, in my life, everything that has happened that has been really important has happened in a person-to-person basis, like warm hand to warm hand, not the large sort of sphere of people, because propaganda is really easy to get going when you get large crowds of people. You get involved with then just people being afraid or people being persuaded or whatever. But the person to person, I think, can be a real path to truth. And I also think that we're making some headway on it. And I think the headway is in wanting our couple relationships, our family relationships to be egalitarian, to be reciprocal, to be mutual, even though we don't have traditions that show us how to do that. We have skills that can help us do that. And those skills do have to do with dialogue, with reasoning, with curiosity, modesty, and then also knowing how to recognize the truth, that the truth it has to align with imperfection, impermanence, interdependence, non-separation. The truth has to align also with these human issues.
But one gets one draws those conclusions from having a specific experience. And what I understand you saying is that unless you're spiritually grounded, you shouldn't be political. You shouldn't be trying to change anything until you are yourself grounded. And that grounding isn't going to come from therapy. It's not going to come through the idea of the marketplace of ideas. It's going to come through meditation, perhaps? No?
Well, I don't want to say that everybody has to meditate to find the truth. I think the truth is actually widely available. And I think the truth also can happen by accident. I think spiritual practice makes accidents more common, that you know more about how to engage with the accident that shows you the truth. I think life itself as a human, because of our impermanence, that we know we're going to die, I think it has a spiritual nature, because you come into being, you find out you're going to die, and you don't know why you're here. All of those things tend to lead to deeper questions. Now, if you are hungry all the time, or if you're afraid all the time, you may not be able to ask those questions. But on the other hand, a lot great spiritual teachers came from situations where they were hungry and afraid, So it's like, I think life itself provides lots of opportunities for the truth. I don't think you have to seek it spiritually, but I do think you have to recognize it, the truth. And that's one reason why I do pay attention, is because I want to talk to people who have different views, who have different knowledge, different expertise than I have, and people that I think are actually speaking from a place of truth, even if it's completely different from what my place of beginning would be. So I'm looking for people who are modest. I'm looking for people who know what they're talking about, who actually will show me their assumptions, who will go through the dialogue until I can understand why they believe what they believe. And I think that this is what psychotherapy is about. So I want to just get to this one final point. Individual psychotherapy. People come to individual psychotherapy here, where I live in Vermont, typically because they don't like something about themselves. I could call it self-hatred, or I could say lack of confidence, low self-esteem. There's some way that they don't like or can't tolerate something that is happening in their own lives, or some way that they have of interacting with someone who's close at hand. Over time, they have to get to know their own personality. It's like, in order to work with yourself, you have to have a knowledge of what was that group you grew up with. What are your habits of mind? How did you fall into the ways you defend yourself, and et cetera, et cetera. Once you can see those things, then you start to have a knowledge of yourself. Like, just to put it in terms of Polly, I know Polly's personality. I know where Polly, tends to fall short. I know my reactivity. I know what throws me, et cetera. So I get to know Polly. Then the second thing is, and this is the critical truth thing, I have to accept Polly. I cannot tinker with Polly because Polly is a particular being who came into being in circumstances that I didn't control. And so as I get to know Polly, I have to accept Polly. Then I can work with Polly. Then maybe she's a little less rigid. She's a little less reactive because she knows that she's going to react over here. She knows this type of thing, like lying and going behind my back actually agitates me. I know that. So then I can actually work with my truth-mongering side and soften it a little and realize not everybody, is so interested in this particular thing. So I could get off my high horse sometimes. So, it's like working with yourself, knowing yourself, working with yourself, knowing the truth of your individual being leads you to more flexibility. It leads you to more openness, more curiosity about others. But you can't get to that point by leaping over the knowledge of who you are as a particular being. You can't leap over that and get a lot more flexible in working with Arthur. You have to figure out some stuff about who Arthur is, how he got to be that way. Why do people need to know about their past? Obviously in therapy, they're not remembering their past, they're constructing a past. I mean, we can't remember what happened yesterday, so we're making up a narrative about the past, about what seems to be true. However, it gives you compassion, real compassion for yourself, because you realize, you came by this foible honestly. You didn't invent the fact that you like heroin. You grew up with someone who used addiction to try to get some ease in life. You start to get compassion for yourself. There's a reason why you are the way you are. And those reasons have to do with the particular conditions in which you grew up. So the growing compassion for yourself is a part of individual psychotherapy, the knowledge of yourself, the acceptance of yourself, and then finally becoming a friend to yourself, that you can take yourself around and be friendly to yourself. So you never have to really refuse something that is an experience in yourself. If you're hungry, you feed yourself. If you're tired, you go to bed. If you're afraid, you find a way to reassure, protect yourself. But you do it now with consciousness, with some flexibility, with some less rigidity, et cetera. So that's kind of individual psychotherapy. And it is a path of truth because it's the truth of getting to know who you are. And it's the truth of recognizing you're limited. And it's the truth of recognizing then everybody is limited. You get that far in individual psychotherapy before you get off the train. In couples therapy, it's a little different because what you find out then is how you have to work with the truth of who the other person is. That you don't control the other person. You don't dominate the other person. You don't erase the other person. And so somebody said to me the other day, I was talking about her partner, and she said, but if you can't control, then how do you ever get somebody to do what you want them to do? And I said, well, you don't. And she said, do you mean like we can't control other people? I said, that's called slavery. It's called taking away their autonomy. No, we have to negotiate with them. If they're human beings, we have to negotiate. You can dominate your dog. With a human, you have to negotiate. So, again, that's a truth. That's a truth. And when we recognize that truth deeply, we recognize why slavery is not possible for humans. it is not possible for us to live like that because we don't control each other, and we have to find the truth together. So, again, in couples therapy, that's what people find out. They don't control each other. They learn how to dialogue. They learn all of those skills about the modesty, the curiosity, and so on. So, I try to teach this path of truth through everything I do. And I try to teach also that there is truth, that it's not just all subjective. There is truth. It has to do with the form that we're in, and it also has to do with the unitary aspects of the world or space-time or existence or whatever you want to call what it is that we're all in together. You can call it anything you want. You call it God, as far as I'm concerned. But there is unity in that. There is truth in that. It's a reality. And when you feel all of this truth all the way through, you actually can relax a lot more. And you feel a lot more confident, whether you're living or dying in any particular moment. You can feel confident when you're dying because you're in the truth of it, and you realize that you're not alone. You realize that you're aligned with something else. So I feel like, I've been preaching here or something, but I hope it's clear.
It's been really fascinating to me. I mean, you can't grasp the truth unless you relax, and you can relax. And once you've grasped the truth, you can relax.
You can relax a lot more. And you know when you're actually in the truth because you're aligned with reality. And reality has a certain characteristic. And you know when you're in the truth for your own personality because you're aligned with the reality of your personality.
But one of those truths that you align with, if I understood you, is one of those truths is also the imperfection of your ability to grasp the truth.
It's the imperfection of your individual ability to grasp the truth. You need others in your species.
Right.
And then you can get better and better at seeing the bigger picture. And part of that bigger picture is the unitary love.
That's the role of the therapist, then, is to provide that love and that to be that other person.
In therapy, yes, it is. In your family, you're not a therapist. I mean, when you're with your friends and family, you don't have any special status. Then you're just doing the human thing. And I mean, the therapist is human too, but the therapist is actually, we all take essentially a vow of non-retaliation when we are in the therapist's seat, and so we're really much more ideal than we are in our own kitchens when we're acting better than we do in our own kitchens. But, it's in order to bring about a process with another person that one takes that vow of non-retaliation. But while you're doing that with the other person, you do gain skills that you can take to your kitchen. You can take them other places, but they're not there when you're working with somebody that you actually want to control. I mean, with my people I see in therapy, I'm not that interested in controlling anything about their lives. They're in their lives. But when I'm with my grown son, or I'm with my partner, or I'm with somebody who's even a friend, I want to control. I want things to work out well. I want to control it. And that's a problem. So then I make mistakes. And, I'm always making mistakes, but I make more mistakes with the people that I care about than the people I see in, not that I don't care about the people in therapy, but I mean, the people I'm personally in the life project with, those are the hardest people.
Right. But because you're the fullest part of yourself, you're the fuller part of yourself in those relationships as well.
Yes, you're really devoted. And, and there's this unfortunate human thing that when you want things to turn out well, you become more narrow-minded, so then you need the other person again. You need to check on that. So, the main things that I think I want to convey in the pay attention interviews are that there is an ultimate truth and there is conventional truth. And those truths have to be experienced directly. In the ultimate category. You can't really narrate them. In the conventional world, you must use language. You must speak as truthfully as you can. You must be curious. You must be asking questions. You need to use debate. You need to use dialogue. As human beings, that's our best path to truth in any endeavor, whether it's science or religion, government, politics. It's the one thing we have, is that we can connect through words. We can do that. And if we can try things out, we can begin to see the assumptions. Then we can see if there's a logic. We can see if the thing can work. But if we go directly to reactivity, then we will protect ourselves, promote ourselves, protect our tribe, identify only with the little small self. And we'll go to war, because that's what we've been doing. That's our habit. That's where we go. And, it's a terrible tragedy that human beings kill each other as often as they do. And it's ongoing now, So that's in my mind the great, great tragedy of being human, is that human beings willingly kill each other repeatedly, and they call that war. And it's a big mistake. So, I hope that doing interviews about truth in troubling times, I hope people will understand, from this conversation, it's been a little bit of a preaching on my side, but, that it's a serious thing. The truth is a very, very serious thing. It's not trivial. It's not subjective. And when you can see it, you relax, and then you can begin to see what it means to be human. And then if you can use conventional truth, you relax more with the human. So, it's all about really being able to relax, be open, be confident, curious, engaged. That's what life is. That's what the life project is. And of course, it requires being engaged with death and with mistakes and with people that you don't like and with the people who do things that you don't like, etc. All of that is part of the engagement. So,
well, thank you. I understand two things. I understand now the rationale behind the work that you do personally, and why you as a therapist and as a practitioner of Buddhism are so invested in the importance of truth, and also why that search for truth, how that search for truth underlies these interviews that you've been doing with other people.
Oh, brilliant. I'm so happy, because that's what I was hoping you would see it. And so I must have said it clearly enough that it conveys the bigger picture, because I will be doing some of these things through Rowe as well. And I always like the opportunity to be able to do these kinds of engagements, because it is in the spirit of everything I do, this search for the path to truth and the way of truth between people. And that, I believe, is the actual path to peace, and to love. So thank you, Arthur, for doing this with me.